Putin hints at a nuclear arms control deal with the US, says Washington is making sincere efforts to end the war in Ukraine. The setting? Alaska. Trump, Putin, one-on-one. Putin's most trusted men also fly in. Leaked maps hint at borders redrawn. The model? The West Bank. Is this peace, or a deal that locks Ukraine's losses forever? A day before his planned summit with US President Donald Trump, Russian President Vladimir Putin said Washington was making sincere efforts to help end the conflict in Ukraine and suggested Moscow and Washington could move towards an agreement on nuclear arms control. Speaking at the Kremlin to senior military and civilian officials, Putin briefed them on the status of negotiations with the United States and Ukraine.
Dear colleagues, good afternoon. I asked you to gather today in order to inform you about how the negotiation process on the Ukrainian crisis is going, how the bilateral negotiations with the Ukrainian delegation are going. One way or another, many of those present know, of course, in general terms, and I will tell you in more detail.
Putin said discussions with Washington were aimed at creating the long-term conditions of peace between our countries, in Europe, and in the world as a whole, contingent on potential future agreements over strategic offensive arms control.
I will tell you about the stage we are at with the current American administration, which, as everyone knows, is making, in my opinion, quite energetic and sincere efforts to stop the hostilities, stop the crisis, and reach agreements that are of interest to all parties involved in this conflict, in order to create long-term conditions for peace both between our countries and in Europe, and in the world as a whole. If at the next stage we reach agreements in the area of control over strategic offensive weapons. That is what I wanted to say at the beginning.
Putin is scheduled to meet Trump in Alaska on August 15th. The two countries hold the world's largest nuclear arsenals, and the only remaining arms control framework between them, the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, is set to expire on February 5th, 2026. Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov revealed that Putin's meeting with Trump in Alaska will begin at 11:30 a.m. Alaska local time on August 15th with a one-on-one conversation in the presence of interpreters. Trump's planned meeting with Putin in Alaska will be the first face-to-face meeting between the two leaders since the start of Trump's second term. The high-stakes summit is part of Washington's effort to help end the war in Ukraine. Speaking about the delegation that is set to visit Alaska with the Russian president, the Kremlin advisor said,
I will name the members of the Russian delegation. They are Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, Presidential Foreign Policy Aide Yuri Ushakov, Defense Minister Andrei Belousov, Finance Minister Anton Siluanov, and the President's Special Envoy in charge of investment and economic cooperation with foreign countries, Kirill Dmitriev.
Speaking to reporters on August 14th, Ushakov said the talks will take place in the US Air Force's Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson and that the summit program has been finalized. I can say that the program of the Russian and US leaders has been agreed upon. The meeting, as you all well know, will take place in Alaska, in Anchorage, and specifically on one of the premises of Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson Air Force Base. Ushakov said the US side has finalized its delegation list but left it to Washington to announce, and that the Russian delegation is expected to depart for Moscow immediately after the meeting concludes.
After that, the talks between the two delegations will take place. These talks will continue over the working lunch. The list of the participants has already been confirmed. Given the fact that very important and sensitive matters will be discussed, the circle of the participants is not a broad one.
Ushakov added that Russia sees untapped potential in US-Russia trade and economic ties. Earlier, The Times reported on August 13th that the US and Russia may be looking to Israel's control of the West Bank as a model for ending the war in Ukraine. The British outlet said that according to a source close to the US National Security Council, the scenario would involve Russia having security and economic control over the areas it currently occupies, while formally they remain part of Ukraine. The Times quoted the source as saying,
It'll just be like Israel occupies the West Bank, with a governor with an economic situation that goes into Russia, not Ukraine. But it'll still be Ukraine because Ukraine will never give up its sovereignty. But the reality is it'll be occupied territory and the model is Palestine.
The newspaper wrote that the idea was raised in a meeting between Russian officials and Steve Witkoff, US President Donald Trump's chief envoy. Witkoff has also led US efforts to free the Israeli hostages held by Hamas and reach a ceasefire in the war in Gaza. However, Deputy White House Press Secretary Anna Kelly denied the report as total fake news and sloppy reporting by the Times, which she said clearly has terrible sources. Kelly stressed that nothing of the sort was discussed with anyone at any point.